3 weeks before the vote.
If I may, I want to open with sending my condolences to Gal Keidan's family, the one who was killed today near Ariel, and my wishes and prayers to the families of the wounded.
If we're talking about this already, then let's get into that. I mean, this terror attack in the West Bank this morning, it's by no means really an isolated incident, happens all the time here. If Blue and White is in government now, if you are at the helm, how do you react? What do you do differently than what's been done so far?
Well, let me remind you what you know, that my partners in the Blue and White Party are 3 former commander-in-chiefs. One of them was also the Minister of Defense. So I don't think it is even precedent to have such a combined experience in dealing with the threats Israel is facing. We constantly talk about the fact that the IDF is the strongest army in the Middle East. These are the people who made it the strongest army in the Middle East, and therefore they will be the one who will be more than capable to challenge the threats that we're facing.
What specifically? For example, the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, has sort of had an unofficial policy of not talking to Mahmoud Abbas, of cutting off ties with the Palestinian Authority. Will that change, for example? Do you support that?
Well, I kind of agree to the fact that I don't think water will ever come out of this rock. I mean, we should have the courage and vision of Menachem Begin, but we also should have the patience to wait for a Palestinian leader with the vision of Anwar Sadat, and we don't have such a partner on the other side right now. Now, this is why our solution or our way to move forward cautiously is through a regional conference with other forces, with the Egyptians, Saudis, Gulf countries.
Similar to what Netanyahu suggests.
I don't know. It has nothing to do with what you suggest, but what you do. So our goal is to separate from the Palestinians. Our goal is to make sure that the fence is taller, not lower. I mean, what we need to do is to have a separation under 4 conditions. One is that Israel's security stays in Israel's hands. If there are 2 terrorists in a basement in Nablus, I want the IDF to be able, even in the future, to go there and kill them. 2 is that the borders stay, the security borders, including the Jordan Valley. 3, there will be no right of return, not a single Palestinian refugee. They're not even refugees. It's a hoax. And 4, of course, Jerusalem will never be divided because it is our capital. And the same way the French will never divide Paris and the British will never divide London, we will not divide our capital. So these are the 4 basic rules. These are tough rules. These are red lines. And yet we should go to a regional conference and start a very cautious and very slow
more on that later, but I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, just one more question about it. Last week, I think it was your partner, Bogi Alon, who spoke of the fact that we don't have a partner on the other side. According to the answer right now, it's a bit the same. So my question is there a possibility that one day will prevent the cycle of violences? Can Kahol and Lavan, your party, prevent those cycle of violences?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to remember, we will have to move forward with people who are our enemies. If I think the late Yitzhak Rabin used to say, if we had the conflict with the Norwegians, there will be no problem. We have a problem with enemies. I do recognize the fact that the Palestinians are suffering, but they're not suffering because of Israel. They're suffering because of other Palestinians. And therefore, we need to move forward in separating from them, as I was saying, in a very cautious way. And we have to make but we're going to do it with people who hates us, who wants and I mean, there is a whole mythology of let's kill the Jews within the Palestinian society that we have to face. And this is more of a reason for us to do our best to separate from them in the future.
I do want to clarify what that means, though. You're repeating what's in your platform, separation from the Palestinians. You avoided mentioning Palestinian state or 2-state solution in there. But Bogi Alon, Moshe Alon, the same running mate, Boaz, that you just mentioned, supports adding settlers to the West Bank, and he's opposed to a 2-state solution. So how do you reconcile that?
In our platform, and Bogi is signed on this platform the same way I do, we are saying we must not take steps that will prevent any possibility in the future of separating from the Palestinians. We can build within the blocks. There's no problem there. It's going to stay Israel. You know what we discussed? We opened this conversation. We was talking about what happened today in Ariel. As Minister of Finance, I was the first one putting money into to building the Ariel University. My son...
First speech also was there.
Also, my first speech was in Ariel. My son is a student in Ariel. I had the very difficult moments this morning before I got hold of him. So this is part of Israel, so we can build in it and we can develop it. I see no reason for us to prevent the possibility of any future movement outside the big blocks.
This evening, the Supreme Court disqualified one of the leaders of the right-wing party, extreme right-wing party, Michael Ben-Ari,
yes,
but accepted the candidacy of Balad's representative, extreme left this time, Ofer Kassif. Your comment?
Well, of course I accept the Supreme Court ruling because this is what we do. We accept the Supreme Court ruling because this is the Supreme Court, and I pain the fact that there are people within the Israeli government who's trying to undermine the Supreme Court. I'm unhappy because I wanted to disqualify the Ofer Kassif as well. This is how we voted in the election committee. But this is the ruling. And I am happy that Michael Ben-Ari is not going to be in the next Knesset because I don't think this kind of blunt racism should be part of our political system.
In reaction to this, your running mate Benny Gantz said that thankfully there is a court in Jerusalem that can make these kinds of decisions and that can draw lines in the sand.
Yeah.
And that can draw lines in the sand. So he seems to fully support this decision. Are you on the same page in that when Balad is allowed to run?
Yeah, well, I didn't want Balad to run, as I was saying. We also wanted to disqualify Balad, and we voted for the disqualification of Balad in the election committee. Obviously, our view was not accepted, and I respect the rule.
Mr. Lapid, don't you think that Israel democracy is strong enough to bear those two personalities, or if I can call them personalities, Ben-Ari and Ofer Kassif in the Knesset? Words don't kill.
Well, it's always an interesting question. I think democracies must defend themselves from non-democratic powers that work from within, using democracy against democracy. Yeah. Now, it's a thin line, and the right place to discuss this or make those decisions maybe is the Supreme Court. But yes, I think there is a thin line between democracy and an anarchy, and the thin line is whether or not democracies defend themselves. So I think, yes, we should defend ourselves from certain views that have an influence, that are echoing. Listen, when somebody like this is in Knesset, then his despicable views are being amplified by his presence within the Knesset.
Ever since I woke up this morning, 6:05, there is a question I want to ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thursday, we're all in Israel, had the news with the cell phone of Mr. Gantz being hacked by the Iranians, according to the news. For you, when you decided, the fusion, the alliance with Mr. Gantz knew about it already. Are you angry against him?
No, because it's not a big story. No, first of all, if you woke up with this at 6:05, you should have called me. Why wait until the evening?
Build up the suspense.
Yes, there's no need to build up the suspense. Of course not. Listen, anyone who has anything to do with Israel's security, especially somebody like Mr. Gantz, who used to be the commander-in-chief, or even like myself, I was a member of cabinet. I'm still today a member of the Security Committee and the Subcommittee for Intelligence and Secret Services, knows he might be hacked. And therefore, we are all being very careful about what we have or not have on our personal phones. So it's not a big deal. The only reason this story was published 2 days ago is because it's the same day there was a big story about the fact that Netanyahu got 16 million shekels from a company that was attached to ThyssenKrupp, that the German company who supplied Israel with the submarines. It's a painful story for him. It's going to make him again at the center of the submarine scandals, and he wanted to make sure that people talk about somebody else. So it's a typical political spin that should never have happened, because this is the fact of the matter is Mr. Netanyahu knew this should never be in the news.
But do you think that you have the right to know what there is in this phone?
No, I think it's his personal phone, as long as there's nothing that has to do with security. If there's nothing to do with security, it's nobody's business.
You open this interview by saying what we all know, that your party is made up of yourself and 3 former chiefs of staff.
Yeah.
Enormous security pedigree.
Commander-in-Chiefs, I think is the right term.
Chiefs of Staff, Commander-in-Chief,
Okay.
same, head of the army.
Both sounds important.
So
True.
you're playing
And
the
they are
security
also tall.
card.
All of them are very tall.
All of
Every
them are
time
tall.
I was looking at the clip, everybody's so much taller than
Thankfully,
me. Not only they can
interviews
pull
are
a rank
conducted
on me,
sitting down.
they're taller than me as well. Yes.
So they have all the security pedigree. You're playing on that. But why should voters trust this party to defend the country if they can't protect a cell phone?
No, everybody, let me tell you, there are thousands of Iranian hacking attempts on everybody every day. And therefore, the solution for everybody who knows his way around is just make sure nothing that has to do with security is on your private phone. We all know that. We're all experienced people. We were sitting, the four of us together when this was published, looking at each other and said, yeah, this is not a big story. We all know exactly what you allowed or not allowed to keep on your personal phone.
Let's go a step beyond. 9th of April, elections. You know, we have elections on the 9th. I hope you're ready. Mr. Gantz, yes, you heard about him. Mr. Gantz spoke of the fact that he will not sit in a government headed by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And you, Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think it was a dream. No? It's still a dream.
The minute he was indicted, well, I could be the Minister of Foreign Affairs 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
I was offered, and it's common knowledge. The minute he was indicted, and I'm not waiting for any hearing. Listen, we are kind of ignoring the fact that we have now a Prime Minister who is indicted for bribe, for very serious charges. And he's going to spend half of his time in courthouses and with lawyers instead of performing his duty. And you know what? This is intolerable to me, both morally and in terms of his ability to function.
But if he's elected and the law permits him to be Prime Minister?
And you know what? And still, there is also the question of what is done and what is not done. And what is good for the country and what is not good for the country.
Do you think Case 3000 you mentioned should be reopened?
Yes, I think it is going to be reopened. I think there's no way of going around the fact that he got, and nobody knew about it, 16 million shekels, and